Peter, you have described an electrical magnetic pulse, EMP, as the greatest threat to our civilization. Please again describe for our audience what is an EMP bomb? What is it? Why is it what you say is the greatest threat to America? And welcome to our show again. We're so thrilled to have you back.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And thank you, Pastor, for your prayers of those working to try to protect our civilization from EMP, which is the greatest threat we face. Need all the help we can get, including your prayers. God might not choose an EMP bomb if he wanted to punish mankind and wipe civilization off the face of the earth. He might use an EMP from the sun, which is inevitable, is going to be sure to happen someday. And perhaps as we talk about the EMP threat, we should start with that, because the sun creates electromagnetic pulses every year, which can do damage to electric grids and shut down communications and interfere with air traffic. But these regular EMPs that happen every year are not the kind of EMP we're most concerned about. We're most concerned about the EMP superstorm that can happen about once a century or so. For example, in 1859, the sun created a natural EMP called the Carrington event, which destroyed. We weren't an electronic civilization then, but we did have electronics. We were just starting to become an electronic civilization. And here I have a telegraph key from that looks very similar to the kinds of telegraph keys they had in that area there, in that era. As you can see, this is a very crude, clunky piece of instrumentation, and it's very robust compared to the microelectronics that we rely upon today for all of our life-sustaining critical infrastructures. But in 1859, when the EMP from the sun hit, when the Carrington event happened, telegraph keys like this all over the world melted. Telegraph systems failed. On every continent except Antarctica, there were telegraph systems. In South America, North America, Europe, Africa, Asia, there were telegraph systems everywhere, and all of them failed. Now, civilization didn't come to an end back in 1859 because we weren't yet an electronic civilization. And these telegraph systems were, electronics was in their infancy. But that gave us an idea about what an EMP from the sun can do. It can destroy these primitive telegraph keys that are literally a billion, not a million, but a billion with a B, a billion times less vulnerable to EMP than our modern microelectronics. So if we had an EMP from the sun today, it would collapse electric power grids, communication systems, and food and water infrastructures that depend upon electricity would go dark. The electronic civilizations around the world would go dark, and billions of lives would be put at risk from an EMP superstorm from the sun, which is inevitable. It's going to happen for sure someday. I think NASA estimates 12% per decade. And in 2012, we were narrowly missed by one of these geomagnetic superstorms. It missed us by about 3 days. So that's one threat. Another threat, we were talking about the EMP bombs, the EMP threat from China. Any nuclear weapon detonated above the atmosphere at high altitude can cause an EMP that would black out all of North America. At an altitude of 300 kilometers high, that's in outer space. If you were standing on the ground directly beneath the explosion, you wouldn't even hear it go off. And there'd be no blast, there'd be no radioactive fallout that would reach the Earth, no mushroom cloud, just this extremely powerful electromagnetic pulse. And the EMP would pass harmlessly through people's bodies, just like a radio wave. So you wouldn't feel it, but it would destroy electronic systems everywhere, cause airplanes to fall out of the sky, cars wouldn't start, electric grids would go into blackout. Immediately, there'd be no water. The food supply, we only have enough food to feed our population of 330 million people for about 30 days, and that would begin to spoil within a few days once the emergency generators ran out of fuel, assuming that they survived the EMP. So that's another threat, the nuclear EMP threat. And there are nuclear weapons. China has super EMP weapons, as does Russia and North Korea, weapons that are specially designed to make extraordinarily powerful electromagnetic pulses. These super EMP weapons are so powerful that they could potentially paralyze our nuclear retaliatory forces in command and control. You know, a lot of people say, well, we wouldn't have to worry about an EMP attack from Russia or China or Iran or North Korea because America could retaliate with a nuclear strike. But not if you're hit with a super EMP weapon. It could paralyze our retaliatory forces and destroy their electronics so that we wouldn't be able to retaliate. Another thing that happens with an EMP is that the satellites and ballistic missile early warning radars will also be destroyed at the speed of light. And these are what we depend upon to identify who attacked us. If we don't know who attacked us, then deterrence doesn't work. The threat of a retaliatory strike doesn't work because you need to know against whom to retaliate, assuming that you can retaliate at all. And so those are two types of EMP weapons: the regular nuclear bomb and then the super EMP nuclear weapon, which is the most powerful. But then there's a category of nuclear weapon, of non-nuclear EMP weapons. They are not nuclear. You can generate electromagnetic pulses by non-nuclear means. Now, these pulses are not as powerful as what you'd get from a nuclear weapon. But you can put an EMP non-nuclear generator as a warhead on a cruise missile, for example. And that cruise missile could be designed to follow power lines. And you could use more than one cruise missile to do this. You could launch a fleet of cruise missiles. It wouldn't take many. If we lost 9 key extra high voltage transformer substations, it would black out the whole North American electric grid, for possibly a year or more. And we can't survive as a nation. We can't survive as a civilization without our electric grid being down for a protracted period of time.
What would that do if America was power outage for a year? What would happen to the state of America? What would life be like then in the United States?
There wouldn't be much human life left. We calculated that if we had a blackout that lasted a year in the United States, a nationwide blackout, it could kill 9 of 10 Americans, 90% of our population, through starvation, disease, and societal collapse. We tried hard to figure out, well, how do we keep the people alive? But you can't support 330 million Americans with no food and no water for a year. And there's other disasters that would happen that would also be extremely threatening to human life. We have 100 nuclear power reactors in this country. All of them would likely go Fukushima and spread radioactivity everywhere. Natural gas pipelines, are pervasive in cities, and these would likely, the SCADAs that manage the natural gas pipelines would likely explode, so you could end up with firestorms in cities and forest fires. There's all kinds of industrial processes that rely on electric control systems that entail volatile and flammable and explosive chemicals. For example, our oil refinery plants that manufacture our gasoline and other petroleum products, are basically dangerous chemistry sets when an EMP happens. And these things would explode and cause all kinds of environmental damage. Simple things like getting water. We need vast quantities of electricity to purify our water, to pump our water, to provide water to our electricity, to our cities and to our towns. And so you'd immediately have no water. People can't survive for more than a week without water. And the lakes and rivers would become polluted because one of the things that typically happens is that the water purification plants back up, and human wastes, industrial wastes, hospital wastes, all kinds of sewage, toxic chemicals, it's released from the water for purification plants and goes into the rivers and lakes. Normally, our rivers and lakes are not sufficiently pure to drink from. You take your life in your hands if you were to drink from a river that's near a large urban industrial area. but in the aftermath of an EMP that would become really toxic and dangerous to drink from. So these are the kinds of things that would happen in the aftermath of an actual of an EMP from the sun, or an EMP caused by man using nuclear or non-nuclear weapons. And it's why it's the greatest threat to our civilization, because we are an electronic civilization. We can't survive without that electricity.